Hello everyone, and welcome to week 5 of our Introduction to Literature class. This is an exciting week. It's our last week of a literary element. We've covered character, setting, theme, point of view, a few wild cards, and now we're getting into symbols and symbolism. And I gotta say, out of all those other ones, I think this one can sometimes be the most challenging. It was one of the most challenging for me as a high school and college student. I always found that I was missing items, and I'd get to class and teachers would explain to me what the water symbolized, and I couldn't see it sometimes. I have a little different view of symbols now. I do like to think about them. They do get me engaged in the reading. The great thing for me about symbols is digging into the details about the item or the action that is symbolic, and then applying those details to what I think the symbol might be suggesting. I could be right. I could be wrong about these symbols. Sometimes, certainly authors develop symbols and symbolism. Sometimes they don't. Talking to my friend Diane Cook, who wrote Bounty, she's been thrilled to find out some things that my students found to be symbolic in her story, Bounty, that she didn't necessarily intend, but she could see how they might be paths or doors into the story, at least get you engaged with the story. So we're going to talk about symbols here in a second. You got 3 stories for this week. Two Kinds by Amy Tan. A Run of Bad Luck by Annie Proulx. And Battle Royal by Ralph Ellison. They're all very different stories. Two Kinds is about a mother and daughter. The mother immigrated to America from China. She's coming here really engaging in a second life. She's got a new husband, a new family. And her daughter and her are not seeing eye to eye about certain things. There's some really interesting symbols in this story, physical items that act in an important way. Sorry, something just came up on the computer. There we go. And it's fun to think about not only the items in the story, but also the actions. How the main character, Jingmei, who I absolutely adore, uses these items and discusses these items in the story, what they mean to her and what they mean to the mom. So we got 2 kinds. We've got Battle Royal, which is a classic story by Ralph Ellison, one of the preeminent African-American writers, black writers of the 20th century. He wrote an amazing book called Invisible Man, which I think I have a copy of. I don't see it now. I must have taken it home. That's how amazing it is. And Battle Royal serves as a chapter from that, but also a short story. And it examines segregationist South United States during the Jim Crow era. So we're talking 30s, 40s, 1930s, 1940s. There's a number of interesting symbols in this story, physical items that come to resonate to be very meaningful items in the story. And then finally we got A Run of Bad Luck. This is by Annie Proulx. I think this one might be the most confusing story of the 3. Some people have told me it's the most confusing story of the semester. I think Annie Proulx is an amazing writer. She wrote things like The Shipping News. She wrote Brokeback Mountain. In this story, it's from a collection of stories that take place in New Hampshire, Maine, right on the border there, near Mount Washington. And this is a story about a family getting ready to go hunting. And there's some really wonderful items and actions in the story that are symbolic. The most confusing thing in A Run of Bad Luck that I've heard from students is that Annie Proulx doesn't do a great job of identifying how these characters are related. How I see the characters are a mother and a father, Haylett and May, or May and Haylett, mother, father, a dog, Patrick, and 4 sons, Ray, Phil, Clover, and Amando. Ray's the one that there's some discussion about whether or not he's one of the sons, but there's a little clue in the story that makes me think he must be one of the sons. And then we have Amando, who's one of those 4 sons, and his wife, Julia, play a prominent role in the story as well. So as you're reading them, with a pencil in hand, perhaps, circle things, asterisk things, underline things that you think might be symbolic. Things that come up a lot, are discussed a lot, and seem to be important. Let's talk a little bit about symbols. Now, symbols are kind of 2 varieties. I've mentioned it already a few times. But you can have a physical item, or you can have an action. If it's a physical item, that item is meant to represent more than its literal meaning, than its literal self. Meaning it suggests other things, other ideas about life, other ideas about the characters. We've seen symbols throughout the readings this semester so far, and I'll talk about one of those in a minute. What can symbols do? If it's an item or an action, it can represent an idea about life. It can certainly appeal to a reader's emotions. It can communicate a message about life. It can clarify the meaning of an event, suggest connections between things, and some of my favorite symbols provide characterization, meaning in that item or in that action we learn about who the characters are. And I think we've seen some of those throughout the semester. If I was perhaps looking for a symbolic action that provided characterization, I might think back to Mama's decision in everyday use to give the quilts to Maggie instead of Dee. I might think of the quilts in that story as a physical symbol, a representation of heritage, stitched together over time from different family members' clothings and articles of history that are in that quilt. But not only do we have the articles that went into the quilt, we also have the action of learning how to quilt and being able to quilt. And that's what Maggie has. Dee doesn't have it. She just wants the product. She doesn't want the process. And we might be able to see some symbolic qualities there. Now, some stories have conventional symbols, meaning they're symbols that are used by multiple artists, multiple authors, and they have a connection over time being almost developed in some works and added onto. You know some of these, I'm sure. A dove can certainly represent peace. A rose could represent love. Spring, like the season of spring, rebirth, life. Winter, not for me because I love winter, but winter can certain things suggest things are dormant, things are quiet, even death. And water is a very common symbol for rebirth. Now, other symbols are private symbols. These are ones that only exist in the work itself. They're not things that exist in multiple works. But they're used by the author to develop an idea. We're going to read about these antlers, this set of antlers in A Run of Bad Luck. They sit on one of the characters' garages. They represent his hunting history and how great a hunter he is. Because I think these antlers have a particular number of points which suggest that the deer that they were on were impressive deer. The tree in the interlopers for me is a real interesting symbol, and that's the one I wanted to talk about a little bit here. We've got a tree on this piece of land that 3 generations of families have been fighting over. So certainly the tree suggests the conflict, the land itself. And it gets blown over by nature, blown over by an act of nature's violence, I think is how it's described. And we come to see that that's how the story ends as well, with another act of nature's violence with the wolves. I love the ending of that story. So we have this tree suggesting the land, right? But also, it suggests for me what it's done to these 2 men who are currently fighting over that strip of land. It comes to fall on them, almost kill them, but certainly limit their movement, limit their freedom. And that conflict has been doing that for 3 generations of family members in Ulrich and Geirog's families. They've had no freedom, no choice, no ability to pursue what they wanted to pursue. And so that tree not only suggests the land, but it also suggests what the land has done to the characters. And I find that so interesting and so fascinating. I love that story, particularly for its use of symbolism. So I think we'll read this week some symbols that are conventional symbols, ones that are used time and time again, but also we'll see some private symbols too, specific symbols just to that story. Now finally, we've been getting to this other part, which is the symbolic act. And that's an action taken, not an item, but an action taken by an individual that holds larger significance than usual. I think Sammy quitting the A&P the way he does it, if you go back and read those details. Ulrich offering the wine to Geirog, that moment of forgiveness, and the husband drawing with Robert. I love that moment. It's a moment of engagement, a moment of life. It's something that the husband hasn't had a lot of in his life, where he actually steps into the process of living and he engages with another human being. And so all of these are symbolic actions. There's a number of other ones too. I think one of my favorites from the stories we've read is Victor acknowledging his friendship with Thomas by offering half of his father's ashes to Thomas. That's a moment of, again, just like the wine, reconciliation, forgiveness, and maybe even a new moment of friendship. So look for these, not just items in these stories, but actions as well. All right. I think that covers symbols for us. Now we're moving next week towards our essay. And it's a theme-based essay. And it asks you to choose one story and pursue the theme of that story through the details and the evidence. And those details and evidence are going to be in the setting, they're going to be in the characters, they're going to be in the plot, they're going to be in the point of view, they're going to be in the symbols. So think about a story that we've read, or a story that we're going to read for this week, and start to consider which one you might want to use for this project. You don't have to do anything for it yet, but we're certainly moving in that direction, and the more you think about a story you want, and the more you even think about maybe a theme in that story, a big idea about life, the better position you're going to be for next week's work. If you have any questions or concerns, you can always reach me by email. I hope you're doing well, and all the best this week, week 5.